Let's sculpt a tiny robot. And then create a scene to tell her story. Along the way, we'll explore some strange materials and perhaps even stranger connections. Starting with lace. Our secret side mission. Use as much lace as possible. Paint it, flock it, wire it, glue it, anything to hide the fact that it's lace. I've gathered 4 kinds, including one truly hideous specimen. Also, we have this metal lace for the robot's armor. But first, we need a robot. What we have here is a shortage of pants, but also a wide range of size options. Both of these figures are 1/12 scale, just like our future robot will be. So depending on the design, the robot could end up anywhere between beefy gladiator and petite doll. Just look at this hand size difference. So here's the height we're working with. Because she's a robot, I'm tweaking the proportions a bit, giving her a slightly larger head and bigger hands. These hands are way too small. Rather than redraw the whole thing, I decide to Vitruvian Man my way through the diagram by adding some wing-like rectangles to guide the new, beefier arm proportions. Robots are made of floral wire. At least, this one is. Giving her a green skeleton will help sell the illusion that nature has taken over, like tiny vines rooted deep in her core. Plus, I like working with fabric-covered wire. It feels nice. The official method here is whatever works. You're basically just twisting and looping wires together to form limbs. Do whatever you need to, while maintaining constant vigilance to stick to the template. Once she's wired up, it's time to bulk her out with aluminum foil, because robots need metal. And this one has been mining my kitchen drawer foil with great enthusiasm. Next, we'll wrap more ropey wire vines, as if the plants are the only thing still holding her together. Feeling underwhelmed? Yeah, me too. But armatures are never much to look at. Now's our chance to sneak in a thin paint wash before she has her armor shell. That's looking slightly toasted. Just like a real robot, we're building this one in sections. And right now, it's face time. The face sets the tone for the whole scene, which is a lot of pressure. So we're tackling this hurdle early. While I practice slow breathing and patient movements on this grape-sized chunk of polymer clay, let's talk about why I'm making this tiny robot scene. Imagine if someone could read you like a book or a piece of code. It sounds like science fiction, but it's very real for some of us. Think of a couple who's been together so long, they know the secret meaning behind a sigh, a glance, or a particular laugh. Or maybe you grew up with close siblings, especially if you're a twin, like me. This project was inspired by my oldest friend, my first connection, my twin sister. As twins, we could challenge and inspire each other like no one else. My twin knows exactly what I'm capable of, and I know her strengths just as well. Our creativity was a living thing. We weren't just playing. We were daring each other to make the invisible real. About 15 years ago, my sister doodled some robots. Not your standard robots. These machines were communing with nature in strange, beautiful ways. Robots speaking to plants, robots becoming part of trees, robots grappling with existentialism. And I couldn't get the idea out of my head. I always wanted to build an art piece around it. And today is that day. This piece is about connection, the visible and the invisible, the ones we're born into, the ones we create, and the ones still waiting for us. A final swab of alcohol smooths the clay, and then it's time to bake. She probably doesn't need a full face of makeup, but a little blushing and a dab of lip tint helps bring her to life. Just enough to say, I'm friendly, but I could crumple a mini fridge. Like a 7-pound dog, a sprawling robot should occupy maximum surface area, leaving just enough room for a few choice details. Armed with a hot knife and a respirator, I carved the pink foam into a cozy-sized base. Miniaturists are physically incapable of throwing things away. So when I had leftover sludge from my last project, a chunky stew of black paint, Mod Podge, and sand, I enthusiastically smushed it on along the top. A gritty base to grip greenery. Once that's set, I carved some basic rock formations into the sides and gave everything a good dramatic coat of black. It's time for the first lace challenge. And we're not easing into it. We're diving straight for the ugliest lace. This acrylic affront to floral design. Why do I even own this monstrosity? Well, the tiny nubs are pretty great for making miniature wreath accents. The giant flowers, though, completely useless. Unless, maybe we can cut them up and turn them into texture. A little glue, a little fussing. So far, these results are looking interesting, familiar even. But maybe we can improve it with a little paint. Starting with this watery deep green to settle into the cracks and crevices. Mini paints often make me laugh. I'll see this pleasing purple and get excited. And then I read the label and it says, Blighted Bean. Acrylics were made for layering. So I just keep piling on color until I get a sort of cyberpunk stone effect. All the tiny robot limbs start the same way, with loops of wire. Hand loops smaller, foot loops bigger. Then we add a thin base layer of polymer clay to bury the loops. Don't forget the foot loops. Here's a quick hack. For curing tiny bits of polymer clay, a heat gun works like magic. Near instant results. Just don't point it at your hand unless you need a dramatic backstory. We'll start with these paddle-like appendages. The feet. I layer the fresh clay over the baked support clay to shape some fat little boots. Like the head and hands, the feet are a bit oversized. Because robots are heavy and appreciate stability. Who doesn't? I rummage through my bead stash for some ornamental shrapnel to embed into the clay around the robot seams I drew with a toothpick. The seam lines are a bit wobbly at this scale, but let's call this a deliberate strategy for simulating aged, weathered metal. Alright, no more clomping around. It's hand time. I add new squishy palms over the thin baked ones. Then roll out an array of micro sausages. To keep things even, I roll and cut parts for both hands at the same time. Then build each hand, attaching and detailing one finger at a time. For fragile parts like these, I love using cosclay. It stays flexible, even after baking, meaning your robot can survive minor scuffles without losing a pinky finger. Thumb placement is everything. If you're not careful, you'll end up with 2 right hands. Ask me how I know. Once we get the palm meat situated, it's time for a battle of gravity and dexterity as we place the bead garnishments. If your robust robot hands are leaning a little too hard into fat toddler territory, a little finger lengthening does wonders. And now we're carving in some grooves. I'm sure they serve a purpose. Once the hands and feet are formed, it's time for the final touch, brushing them with this mirror-like silver powder. Then into the oven they go. This time, a real oven. No heat gun speed runs. When they've cooled, we finish them off with a little dark paint wash. I had eye surgery in November. One little known fact about eye procedures: they can leave your eyes very dry for months. Enter this avalanche of preservative-free eye drops. Because I morally struggle with single-use plastics, I now have a small army of these tiny vials. I've been hoping to find a project for them. My first idea was a factory of mini syrup bottles, but right now, we're exploring their potential as strange mushrooms. I start by cutting away the flat part, and there's not much room for seams on a mushroom, so I cut those away too. The twist tops of the eye drops also have tiny cap shapes nestled inside, perfect for making a few baby mushrooms. We still need to cut the big mushroom caps, but before we do, I have an idea. I love vintage milk glass, the soft white kind with hobnail texture, and I want that look for my mushrooms. It's the perfect excuse to start collecting real milk glass as well. For texture, I try a relief outliner. I spend a weekend dotting mushroom caps, using the uncut dropper vials as handles. The result? Well, once dry, the texture is a little too subtle. Nearly invisible, if we're being honest. But I know it's there. Also, I now own a small milk glass collection. So we're counting this as a win. If there's one thing clear mushrooms crave, it's lights. Specifically, these fairy lights, which will help them glow. Heat shrink tubing might make a good stem material. First, we'll bend the bulb wire. Thread on a small piece of tubing, then reconfigure the fairy bulb into a flying saucer T-shape and slide the invisible tube back up. Slip in a little extra wire for stem strength. By the way, this sparkly stem wire is one I hoard for special projects because I can't find more of it anywhere. Now we shrink ray the stem tubing with the heat gun to hold everything together. This 40-inch roll of iridescent basket wrap has been following me around for over a decade. A little scrap of it could give the mushroom caps a crinkly, magical flash. Used at this rate, the roll will last me another 30 years. Add a little hot glue to the flying saucer, then apply the crinkly flash. Now, hot glue the cap. And finally, we have a whole mushroom. Repeat just 17 more times. Mushrooms like to grow in groups. but right now each one is awkwardly tethered to the next on the light strand. So I draw a mushroom map to help with placement. This suspicious loop is wood filler, which we're using as mud. A few light bulbs are getting buried in the mud to help space out the mushroom clusters. It's okay, they like it in there. Someone appears to be testing out the new lights. I spread a smattering of moss-colored yarn around the base, making sure to leave some questionable mud loops visible. Please enjoy these action shots of mushrooms, doing absolutely nothing. Let's check in with our robot. Often called metal lace or metal ribbon, this material is actually thin sheets of aluminum or tin, stamped with intricate patterns. It's beautiful and vicious. Gloves are a must. This metal will cut you. To fashion the robot's armor, I wrap the metal around random tubular objects, like this wood handle, searching the house in a sort of scavenger hunt for the perfect diameters. I shape pieces for the arms, legs, and torso, carefully keeping them sorted to avoid a medieval game of mix and match. I slip the cylinders onto the robot's armor, and just like with any outfit that doesn't quite fit, you get out a hammer and persuade it into shape. At this point, I remember the lace usage side quest. Since metal lace technically counts, but also technically tries to bite you, it scores a cautious 0.5 on the lace tally. Now we connect the robot skin to the vine wire innards using epoxy sculpt and a firm pep talk. And we're already bringing in the next official lace. This time it's soft fabric lace, which we are painting silver. This trim will help refine the ankle and wrist connections while maintaining flexibility, because dexterity is important to robots. And while we're at it, let's make these awkward epoxy sculpt lumps. Texture? Yes. Now a metal and fabric lace pairing, all in the name of fashionable chest armor. Because we'll eventually pose this robot, we can keep the larger joints flexible with thread. Plus, wrapped thread is soft and rarely bites you. Our robot needs a couple of rocks to support her slouch, but not just any old rocks. These need to be special stones. At first, no famous formations come to mind, but then I picture them. Lee Scoresby's rocks. In the series, His Dark Materials, balloonist Lee Scoresby makes his last stand between two boulders. These are the rocks we need. I sketch out the shapes, then crumple aluminum foil to form the basic structures. Next, I wrap them in torn paper for texture, coating the layers with acrylic gel medium, both inside and out, to preserve the fragile paper. And right now, these look more like misshapen potatoes than laudable landmarks. I take Lee Scoresby's potatoes and give them a black undercoat, followed by a light sponging of brown and gray to bring out the rocky details. Finally, completely cover over the paint you just added with a thorough piling of moss-colored yarn scraps, followed by more paint and some patchy green flocking, which you will also paint later, off camera. And there, 2 rocks worthy of a world-weary traveler. Remember the face? It's still chilling on a scrap clay backing. It's time to take a sharp knife, or several, and carefully trim the face away from the excess clay. Stiff copper wire makes a great sculpting handle, but offers poor posability for a neck. So I swap in this new bendier wire, and affix it with epoxy sculpt. Now we need those round robot earpieces, whatever they're officially called. And maybe we use washers. I see your 2 washers. And raise you a couple of vintage glass buttons. Put it all together, donut and donut hole. Then banish the gaps with more epoxy sculpt. While the epoxy is still curing, seize the opportunity to add some completely necessary silver wire coils. To finish off the head sculpt, we're adding a hint of lace. An antique motif this time. But we only need the smallest part. Just these nubs. To form a quiet crown of lace. In the animated anthology, Love, Death, and Robots, there's an episode called Hebrew, featuring a siren with these sparkly red and green hip jewels that catch the light when she moves. It's mesmerizing. Inspired by that glint, we're giving our robot a little flash of her own, with some vintage metal charms. I think these designs are reindeer, but the shape works, so we're going with it. We'll color them shiny silver to match the robot skin. Then use a thin wire to string them into place. Robots might not need hips, but this one absolutely deserves a well-placed peplum fringe. See that blobby white neck? It's temporary. A poster tack stand-in. The real neck will come later, after we find the perfect head tilt for peak diorama drama. Speaking of tilt, while we can still reach all sides, it's a good time to add some weathering with this dark acrylic paint wash. And don't forget the rust, but just a little. What this diorama desperately needs is a tiny sketchbook. So I devoted an entire weekend to the dark art of miniature coil binding. I'll spill all the secret knowledge in an upcoming video. This hole punch tool might look exotic, but it's really just a push pin with handles. There comes a time in every months-long project where you start questioning your commitment, your stick-with-itness. Suddenly, other projects seem extremely fascinating. But this is the part where you need to double down and finish what you started. Which is when I realized a few things were seriously bothering me about this project. And it was time to fix them. 1. The mushrooms. Recycled plastic for the win. But the mushrooms still looked, well, plastic. How could I make them read mushroom without losing the bioglow? Glass paints to the rescue. I tested 3 tints, red, blue, and purple. Purple won, with a secret touch of cobalt. The baby mushrooms got the same treatment, plus some tiny fawn-like spots, inspired again by the milk glass, but using puff paint this time. 2. The rocky base. Even after layers and layers of paint, the faux stone lace still wasn't quite saying rocky texture. Time to keep experimenting. Maybe some pops of highlights. I add metallic accents using a chrome marker, and the result? I didn't hate it. Number 3. The dome disaster. And finally, the biggest problem. This sad, shallow slope of the robot's forehead. How did her dome end up so flat? With the silver finish and the lace overlay, it felt too late to fix it, but I couldn't let it go. I cleaned the shiny surface with alcohol, then sculpted a new, curvier dome. Using epoxy sculpt, carefully blending it into the lace with small amounts of water and large amounts of patience. A quick mirror shine powder touch-up, and finally, a chrome dome worthy of robot envy. And just like that, we're back on the trail with actual enthusiasm. Now, whose sketchbook is this? It's time to tell Mira's story. Soft moss cushioned Mira Ashwood's steps as she slipped beneath arching branches, inhaling the rich tang of sap and loamy earth. As a child, she'd once wandered too far from her mother's side in a forest much like this. The memory was hazy, like a pencil sketch loosely drawn, then erased too many times. She'd been chasing a butterfly. A moment of curiosity turned panic when the forest swallowed her in a dark, silent sea of green. Alone, heart pounding, she'd pressed her tiny palms against the warm bark of an oak as tears dampened her cheeks. The forest hushed around her and seemed to draw closer. But now, instead of fear, the softest sense of comfort seemed to emanate from the earth itself. Young Mira drank in these new feelings of warmth and light, of love even. Leaves rustled in a pattern she couldn't name, guiding her small steps. When she finally stumbled back into the camp's clearing, her mother's arms wrapped around her with the same unconditional love. Years later, Mira found herself confined to sterile laboratories, where plants existed as dissected samples under harsh lights. She learned to catalog names and measure growth rates, but the slow pulse of living forests eluded her. Instead of rustling leaves and creaking trunks, she now listened only for the clink of test tubes, the clack of a keyboard. Her mentors praised her precision, yet something essential had slipped away. Her life felt disconnected and incomplete. In quiet moments, she sketched wild plants and vines in the margins of her lab notes. So, she left, trading institutional corridors for wandering trails. Now, she carried only her sketchbook, a tent, a few tools, and the memory of that childhood bond with the living world. The star-filled sky beyond the forest canopy reminded her how vast the world could be when not closed in by concrete. Everything felt connected and familiar. The wind-blown leaves, the soft mossy twigs tucked beneath ancient forest roots. It all belonged here. Mira traveled deeper into the forest. She was now days beyond any signs or man-made trails. Here it was so quiet, she imagined she could hear the forest breathing. And it was here that Mira discovered plants that defied every classification she'd ever known. Lace-like tendrils fanned out in intricate patterns, as fine as spider silk, yet held aloft without any support. Nearby, clusters of amethyst mushrooms pulsed faintly, their veins flickering like living circuitry. She pressed samples between paper, but they turned to dust in her hands. It became clear she needed to witness these plants where they thrived, in the murmuring heart of this ancient forest. So she camped among them, sketching by glow of bioluminescence, learning each curve, each filament, as one might learn the contours of a loved one's face. The days passed like hours as Mira studied and wrote. Her curiosity and desire to learn was raw and vast. Yet grief hovered at the edges of her wonder. Her mother, steadfast and joyous, had succumbed to illness last autumn. For Mira, this had been another journey through darkness, this time without a forest to guide her. At her mother's bedside, Mira had held a hand that grew colder with each breath, while her own sense of order quietly unraveled. Now, in these ancient woods, she wasn't sure what she hoped to find, only that something had been lost, and the forest felt like the right place to listen for it. When she paused in silence, still and attentive, the woods seemed to pause with her, not threatening, but watchful, as if meeting her gaze with its own. She spoke softly, not expecting words in return, but trusting that the living tapestry around her would respond in kind. And in those whispered exchanges, she sensed a familiar comfort. One morning, guided by the soft pull of curiosity and something deeper she could not name, Mira followed a narrow channel where moss grew thick and air shimmered with moisture. Ferns arched toward her fingertips, their fronds brushing like a silent invitation. The scent of damp earth mingled with a metallic tang, subtle but undeniable. She paused where moss wrapped around coils, too precise to be natural. Is that metal? Her heart quickened. There, half hidden beneath an ancient canopy, lay a figure, neither living nor wholly machine. Its form was blanketed in lace-like armor. Delicate vines and mosses wrapped the figure gently. Rust and time softened the robot's armor-like edges. Some lost relic of technology, and yet somehow the robot seemed at home among the forest's slow rhythms. Its face, a woman's face, bore the closed eyes of a deep sleep, or perhaps a more permanent state of decommission. Mira stepped closer, breath held. As she did, the robot didn't stir, but the mushrooms around her pulsed brighter, their light rippling through the filigree of vines. The lace-like plants quivered in patterns that reminded her of breathing, and she felt a warm hum resonate beneath her feet. An energy threaded through root and circuit alike. The robot had become part of this living network, perhaps a guardian or translator. Mira knelt and closed her own eyes, extending her senses beyond sight and sound. Words were unnecessary. The forest spoke in pulse and pattern. Slowing her breath, she imagined the slow communion of roots and mycelium, the patient reaching of vines for the sun, and the quiet devotion of the machine that held them all. A memory stirred of her mother's gentle voice, teaching her the names of wildflowers on a summer afternoon. That love, pure, steadfast, unconditional, flowed through Mira now, mingling with the forest's ancient song. When Mira opened her eyes, tears glimmered in the half-light. She pressed her palm against the sentinel's cool surface, offering gratitude for its silent kinship. In return, she felt a surge of belonging, as though every leaf and branch acknowledged her as one of their own, a single part of something vast and wonderful. And it was here that Mira understood. Though the robot was motionless, with eyes closed, she had never been asleep. Mira Ashwood rose to her feet, sketchbook clutched to her chest. For the first time, in a long time, she felt whole. She turned toward home now, and though her mother's hand was gone, the same guiding presence that had led a frightened child to safety now walked invisible beside her, humming in every breath of wind through the trees.